All right, let's go ahead and get started with our July 1st, 2015 DDA meeting. Susan, would you please call the roll?
Happily. Bob Gunzel.
Here.
Roger Hewitt.
Here.
Marie Clough.
Here.
Joan Lowenstein.
Here.
Al McWilliams. John Moat.
Here.
Risha Narayan.
Here.
Keith Orr.
Here.
Steve Powers. Sandy Smith.
Here.
John Split. Phil Weiss.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Terrific. We have audience participation. Remind people that you have 4 minutes. At the 1 minute mark, I'll give up my little signal that you've got 1 minute left. And the first person signed up is Nancy Shore.
No. Send around some papers for you. So I'm Nancy Shore, the director of the Get Downtown program and also the business services director at the RIDE. So I have my RIDE hat on right now and also my Get Downtown hat. Wanted to make sure that all of you are aware of very exciting service changes happening with the bus service happening this August. So because of the millage, we've been rolling out service every year, and I think this is one of the most exciting rollouts because what's happening is on Saturdays, we're going to have service going till 10 or 11 at night, starting at the end of August. Telling you how important that is. So right now, for those of you who use the service or don't, the last bus to leave Ann Arbor on Saturdays is 6:48 p.m. That makes it hard for people who are working to be able to use the bus to get home. It makes it hard for somebody who might want to go to a restaurant and a show to stay here and then go home on the bus. So this is really huge that now we're going to have something to complement our evening economy that we have here in downtown Ann Arbor. So in addition to that, another exciting weekend improvement that we're going to have is that in Ypsilanti there are several local routes that serve the downtown, that serve the transit center there, that then allow people to come here. And those routes are for the first time ever going to have Sunday service and also some increased Saturday service. And why that's important is that I do look at GoPass data for employees that work downtown, and we see that there are employees that are in restaurant industry, work at the Y, work at the library, that are using those Ypsi local routes. And so this again is another way for them to be able to now on Sundays actually get to take the bus to the Ypsi Transit Center and then take the bus to downtown Ann Arbor. So that's also another new service because of the millage that we had that was done by a vote of residents. So that's very exciting. And then finally, we're going to have more Saturday service as well, Sunday service as well. So Sunday service is going to increase an extra hour, which is again going to allow people who are working, shopping, playing to be able to utilize the downtown even more and not worry about bringing their car down and parking. Just to let you know what we're going to do to make sure that people know about these changes, because one of our charges is to make sure that businesses are aware of what's happening so that they can communicate that to their employees, to visitors, to residents. This thing that I handed out here, this flyer, is going to be a postcard that's going to be mailed to all the businesses downtown. We're also going to events such as this so we can make sure that you as the ambassadors of downtown know what's happening. And then we're also going to be sending out emails to all the area associations so that they can provide that information to their members. And we're going to be also making sure that we put that in all of our communications that we send out during GoPass distribution time, as well as when we talk to any employers downtown. So this is the second of another round of changes. So next year there's going to be another round in May. There's going to be some more changes that are going to be happening, and the website for all the changes that's going to happen with the transit service is therideyourway.org. So if you have any questions, you can ask me afterwards. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Nancy. Next we have for audience participation, Richard Broder. All right. Moving on. Reports from city boards and commissions. Mr. Ray Detter.
Last night's Citizens Advisory Council meeting was postponed to Tuesday, July 7th, in order that we as other downtown and near downtown neighbors could have more time to discuss City Council and Planning Commission recommended amendments to downtown D1 zoning. And these changes will be voted on by City Council at their next meeting Monday, July 20th. That's what was postponed to that date. Portions of the current downtown D1 zoning are clearly mistakes. Most people recognize that. The massive 150-foot high 413 East Huron, built right next to one of Ann Arbor's most important residential and historic neighborhoods, is the product of one of those mistakes. Currently proposed zoning law changes passed by the Planning Commission 7-0 are not perfect, but they represent a significant improvement that will keep a 413 East Huron by right project from happening again, and also avoid the death of a 300-year-old landmark oak tree, which is currently taking place. The Planning Commission and City Council recognize that the zoning of the north side of East Huron from State Street almost to North 4th Avenue was a mistake. Many still argue that it's clearly a transitional interface area that should have been zoned D2, 60 feet. Some of us, however, can accept proposed compromises that expand the East Huron 1 character district to include the lots between North State and North Division, as well as the block bounded by Division, 5th and Ann, and a major part of the block bounded by East Huron, North 5th, the alley next to the Hands-On Museum, and East Ann across from the Armory. East Huron D1 character district amendments would establish a maximum height of 120 feet if the parcel fronts East Huron, and as low as 3 stories if the parcel fronts East Ann. The parking lot at 336 East Ann, University of Michigan Credit Union, would be zoned from D1, currently 180 feet, to D2, 60 feet, with side setbacks of 30 feet from any residentially zoned property and 10 feet from any office zoned property. The yellow house next to that empty lot is zoned office. Keep in mind that the property is directly across the street from the historic Old Fourth Ward residential houses, as well as a 200-year-old oak that will surely die if the existing 180 feet zoning remains. Some of us believe a front sidewalk setback of at least 10 feet should be required to match the setbacks of the 2 historic Old Fourth Ward homes that are adjacent to it, leading up to Division Street on Ann. If a future building is planned for the parking lot west of Campus Inn, the maximum height would be 120 feet, not 150 feet. Because proposed zoning changes include a diagonal measurement of no more than 130 feet, the building would be narrower, and that's good. Some of us believe, however, that it could still be built too close to the residential units in Sloan Plaza. If a building is proposed for the city-owned parking lot on Huron east of City Hall, that's Teos, or the next door rental office and housing units, or the Amos site on the corner next to that Old Fourth Ward Historic House Zone office, the maximum height will be 120 feet with a diagonal measurement of 130 feet. Some of us would prefer greater setbacks. In the case of that lot, which is an interesting one from Huron, which is the Hands-On Museum, all the way to Ann Street, that particular lot will be zoned 120 feet on East Ann, a part of the lot, and will be restricted to 3 stories on East Ann Street, across the street from the Armory. These are steps in the right direction, and we hope that premiums along with these will make some big improvements in zoning in downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. DDA members' communications. I guess it's my job to welcome Phil Weiss, joining the DDA board, and I'd ask you to give us a quick, rundown on what you're all about.
All right, thank you. Phil Weiss. I'm the VP of Commercial Lending at Ann Arbor State Bank. I have a particular specialty in government lending programs like SBA loans, USDA, and so forth. I spent a few years doing strictly SBA 504 loan program, so I won't bore you with the details of that. If you'd like some details over a cup of coffee, let me know. I live on the northeast side, Plymouth and Green Road area. My wife, Liesel, works in marketing over at the Center for Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery in the Riker building. I have a freshman son, Alex, who's just finished his freshman year at Michigan. And my daughter, Ani, will be a senior at Ann Arbor Huron. Both kids are swimmers, water polo people, and we're fully engaged in that arena as well. I'm on the board of the ARC and at the Art Center, so my plate's full.
Well, great. Well,
pleasure to be here.
Welcome. Thanks. We'll soon be putting you to work. I'm sure you're looking forward to that.
I do have a report for boards and commissions.
Very good. Okay.
We did have a connector study meeting, steering committee meeting that Susan also attended. We're still sort of marking time while the university is deciding what their position is going to be on the connector. So there's not really a whole lot to report. Susan, do you have anything to add to that? No. So I'll keep, if there's any new news, I'll let you know.
Very good. Number 5, Executive Director Communications. Susan.
Thank you. I just have a few updates. The first is to let you know that last week there was an abandoned bike sweep through. We're getting really good at this. There's a coordinated effort. I want to thank folks at Republic, the city, DDA staff, Get Downtown, and bikes that look abandoned are tagged. People are given a period of time to let us know if that is their bike, and if not, those bikes are removed. And what's nice about it is it frees up bike parking for a whole lot of other people who are otherwise kept from having that hoop available to them. And it's also nice for art fair. We get rid of some things that are in the way of a lot of pedestrians. I am urging you to make a note, those of you that are interested, that the next date for a DDA, AATA board summit is scheduled for the end of this month. It'll take place here at the DDA on Wednesday the 29th at 10 o'clock. We had, I think, beginnings of a really good dialogue about some topics of shared interest. So for those of you that are interested, again, Wednesday the 29th at 10 here at DDA. And then the last thing to note was Joan and I took an opportunity to attend the IDA Midwest Forum last week in Detroit. I thought it was one of the most informative sessions I've attended, and I'll leave it to Joan to talk about her own experience. I mean, one of the things that was interesting was Detroit is seeing a renaissance like they've never seen. An example is the downtown has a 99% residential occupancy, and Midtown is not far behind at 98.5%. And particularly in downtown, which had never had a residential core, this is huge. These are people animating that sidewalk, you know, making it possible for small businesses to come back. And they can't build them fast enough because as soon as they get them out there, they're leased up. One of the pieces that really came home for me was doing a tour. Detroit has one of the most beautiful set of buildings I think I've ever seen. I mean, we go to Chicago and think about the architecture. The buildings that they're working with, that they're refilling, that they're repurposing, are some of the most beautiful buildings in the world. And we had a chance to see at least a few of them, and it made me jealous that we don't have more buildings like this in our own community. Joan attended a session, I'll let her talk a little bit more about it, that was really a mind opener having to do with car strategies in the downtown. John, you brought that to us before, but this driverless technology and car sharing like Uber, it's going to completely change how we think about cars in the downtown. And what we're doing now and the strategies we're doing now are going to have to change. And for me, something that really resonated was hearing in so many different ways that what is being worked on right now is trying to figure out all the ways in which the city and the region can knit together. That too often, for political and expedient reasons, there had been a separation between the city and its suburbs. And any great region requires a strong city, and that strong city requires a healthy set of communities around it. And that bifurcation of suburb versus urban has allowed the city to fall into such decline. And the people that we met with emphasized again and again, whether it's transportation, whether it's economic development, that all the ways that we have been separated, sometimes trying to compete one against the other, will never be a strong region, and we'll never make that turnaround until we all of us realize that the success of Detroit is the success of Ann Arbor. I mean, it's a hard thing, I think, for some to even think about, that Ann Arbor and Detroit are so interconnected, but we're only 45 minutes away from each other. And any great urban area has a strong city, and any great strong city has strong communities around it. So that was a pretty powerful set of sessions. I'll leave it then with Joan, if you had anything else that you heard that was pretty impactful that we could bring back.
Well, given that we are just about to embark on a parking planning study, parking demand kind of study, it was really interesting to see how other cities are doing that and getting information. I shared with Amber some of the things I learned from that forum that I attended that involved, this forum, for instance, had an engineer at a company in San Francisco does nothing but collect information about these autonomous vehicles and how that might affect parking. And then also there was somebody there, the Midwest director of Uber, who many of us saw come and talk to the city council a lot when there were the kind of the Uber wars going on. And Uber, because all it does is collect data, has also shared data with a lot of these other cities that are doing planning. And so that was really interesting too. And so Amber's going to be working on some of that, getting more of this data from some of these private organizations that collect it. And so that was just, it was just interesting to see how much information is being collected and how it's being used.
So thank you.
Just one quick side note, actually Ann Arbor is hosting a conference this, I believe this week or next week on autonomous cars.
Or no, the phone, great.
Turn that off.
Your wife probably heard you were talking
I
about
know.
it.
Actually, hopefully she's speaking at this conference, so hopefully she's busy. Excuse me. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of May 2015?
So moved.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Subcommittee reports. We're already operations. Messrs. Split, Orr, and Hewitt.
We're going to start with me on page 12 of your packet. There is a resolution to approve a contract with parking structure repairs with Ram Construction. I would like to move that resolution.
Support.
The document, if you squint on page 13, shows that we had 3 competing bids for this work, that Ram was in fact the low bidder, and we are approving a budget of $800,000 because there is a contingency amount of 20% built into the contract. As you know, our parking repairs are based upon our Carl Walker 20-year upkeep program, and these repairs fit into that program.
So a question on that. We pulled back for just a little bit of time on some of the repairs when it got really, really tight. It was a little slower. Do you see any long-term effects, or are we kind of back to completely business as usual?
I think we're back to business completely as usual. We started budgeting more money for parking repairs as a result of that in future years,
Mm-hmm.
and we're staying on top of it, not scheduled.
So no long-term effects?
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, anyone else have anything you'd like to ask about? If not, may I have a voice of approval for this resolution?
Vote.
Vote. I'm sorry. I was distracted there. Are you ready? I guess I should ask first. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thanks. Sorry, I'm trying to think about too many things at the same time. Establish a project.
I believe I take the next one.
Yep.
So this is on page 14 through 26, because there's a lot of information in the packet. The resolution is actually on 14. It's a resolution authorizing a TEM study project budget and the selection of Nelson Nygaard as a project consultant. This started out as we started looking at the parking demand situation, which is once again heating up. We haven't done a study since 2007, and there have been many changes in circumstances since that time. We took actually the recommendations, so often studies are done and then put on shelves somewhere, And in 2007, the TDM study, we pretty much either tried or implemented everything that was in our control. There are some things out of our control, but whether it's city council or whatever, but everything we could control we tried, and it's one of the reasons we're often cited as a model city for our parking. But given that concerns about the supply, we are looking at doing another project. There are going to be two parts to it: an in-depth analysis of public parking supply and demand, and transportation supply and demand, and not just looking at cars, but transit, cycling, and walking as well. And then a creation of recommendations for strategies. For example, modified parking policies, possible parking system additions, it could happen, new transit services, new bicycle accommodations, and so forth. We did put out an RFQ. Nelson Nygaard was the only qualified responder and subsequently submitted a proposal. I guess just a sort of side note on that, he did look to see why we didn't get other people that we could send the RFQ out to when they had not responded. And in pretty much every case it was a scope of work issue, or they didn't have the resources, or in a couple of cases they were already partnering with Nelson Nygaard to be a part of this. Does that sum it up pretty well? Yep, okay. Tom Brown, who's going to be project leader, I forget his exact term, designation, but he came to our last ops meeting just to get questions from us in terms of making sure the scope was understood. They had done a pretty thorough job in their proposal of laying out the scope of work, but we did have a few additions as well. Their proposed fee is $75,000. We are recommending selection of Nelson Nygaard, and we're also recommending an approval budget of $100,000, which includes both contingency amounts and specifically contingency amounts in terms of things that, as the study progresses, we look at and say, here's something we think we need more in-depth for. So, I forgot the most important part, didn't I? I'd like to move this resolution.
Second. Any questions? Any concerns? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you very much. I guess the next one's mine. You'll see there's a recommendation for 2016-2021 construction work plan capital improvements projects on pages 27 and 28. And just as a bit of quick background, since we have a couple of new board members here, back in the winter, we had a retreat at which we looked at a lengthy list of possible projects, and we were able to go through a process to winnow it down to 4 street, and these are street projects within the right-of-way, which is sort of the bread and butter, not unlike what we have done at 5th and Division, that type of project. So in the intervening months, staff has kind of worked up scenarios, brought it to finance with estimated costs. JJR, the consultant, weighed in with information and budgets and advice and thoughts on it. So we've been through I think a fairly robust process, and the goal is to be able to get these things kicked off. I think I'd like to see a good, strong kickoff in September. So the latest was that staff went back and developed 4 scenarios that we evaluated, and essentially it was the same 4 projects, but putting them in different order. And essentially it had financial implications, it had coordination implications with the city work, streets work on certain projects. There's potential partnership project at Southview, as we understand. So there are quite a few factors that kind of came into play with looking at the recommendations. So in the end, as the committee discussed, the operations committee looked at this, and I had a lot of robust conversation about the advantages and disadvantages of things. But as you sort of dig into it, for the purposes of coordination with the city's CIP, from a cost savings point of view, with potential development project on Southview, it was, and State Street just being disrupted once, the committee voted and felt that scenario 1 was the best choice. But we also wanted to give you in the packet scenario 4, which essentially is very similar, except for it swaps State Street and Southview, essentially. And in deference actually to Roger, who was not able to be at the operations meeting, we felt obliged that this should be included in the packet for consideration. As I say, my biggest single goal is to get going in September. That would be my recommendation moving forward. So that's a bit of a preamble, long preamble. But I suspect Roger has something that he.
Well, I unfortunately was ill last week, so I missed the meeting and the discussion, and so I don't know the arguments pro and con between 1 and 4. I guess what I would like to suggest is, whichever way we go, we're going to need to make sure we have consultants, not only to do the project, but probably contractual consultants to oversee the design and construction with us. And I guess I'd feel a little more comfortable if we had one more at the next ops meeting, went through and looked at when support people might be available, how that fits into it, and just have one final pass through, and then go ahead and whatever the committee decides at the next committee meeting, we go ahead and proceed there.
So just as a clarifying question, Roger, as you look at State Street and Southview swapping, are there ways in which you see that affects staffing and consultants particularly, or?
Well, I'm not sure. That's what I'd like to have a little better understanding of the implications of flip-flopping them one way or the other. Since I have businesses in both locations,
You're in a win-win situation.
You're good. But yeah, I guess and I again apologize. I was quite ill last week, but I would be a little more comfortable if we just could, at one last meeting, go through the pros and cons and make sure that we understand whether we have the resources, are going to have the resources available to proceed with either plan. The personnel resources, I should say.
So at this point, I would ask the other folks who participated at the operations committee kind of weigh in. Obviously we had the option of recommending to move forward with scenario 1 or to delay. Keith?
I guess I don't have a real problem, because I think we're waiting a month, because I think we'd still be ready to hit the ground running come September. But just to fill in one of the main reasons, I think most people, with the exception of a beaten, bloody John Split, why most people recommended scenario 1 over 4 was just it's the way it overlapped with the city's CIP. The city's going to be doing street repaving in State Street, so it actually saves us some money to coordinate with them. It's probably not it isn't necessarily a deal breaker situation, because they aren't rebuilding the street, they're just talking about resurfacing the street. Nonetheless, there are savings involved in coordinating with them. So that was one of the major reasons I would say that we felt this was appropriate, along with knowing that in Southview that there is a potential for development, and it would, again, there'd be a lot of savings to be able to coordinate with some of the development that's going on then earlier.
Cindy?
Although I don't attend the ops, I still think that it's fair that anybody can weigh in. And certainly I think this is, scenario one is more reflective of the work that we did as a group in the retreats that we had as far as prioritizing. I think it's also important to honor the time spent doing that to get to this state. So for many reasons, it looks like scenario one should be the one that you go for.
I had a question for staff. I'm assuming that there are not any negatives to if we did decide to push this back a month.
Are there any
would
meetings next week?
Would there be any negative impacts on our getting the work done in whichever order we decide to do it?
So the answer to that is it's your own schedule. We were going to ask you later as we got to committees if you wanted to take a break during the summer, or if we're going to keep forging ahead. We'll have those meetings. And it's your schedule as to when the projects take off. The one time constraint we've got is a real project underway in the Carytown neighborhood. Whatever we do with the pedestrian area has to get organized pretty quick so that the city can include it in its bid package when they do that street reconstruction. But State Street and Southview and Huron are really of our own volition and when we choose to do it. The only thing to note, and this is sobering on any measure, the economy getting better has the impact that the same consultants we're going to want are already getting hired by other people. So the longer we wait, I think that's probably the most real concern. The longer we wait, the more packed their work plan will be, and the less likely some of the good ones would be able to be available to us. But whether that's a month or however we choose to do our own schedule, that's just the only thing to be thinking about. And with regard to staffing, again, regardless of which ones you choose, we are pretty confirmed that a member of the city staff will be retiring this year, will be available to us as a contract employee to join us in our work as staff to support this. So I feel confident we've got the construction expertise and support for the design process as needed for you as a board.
So one thought, John, along those lines could be that I think in both scenarios, the Carytown project, as Susan said, is sort of up for work. And so one thing we could do is ask staff to go ahead and get RFPs put together and issued for Carytown, so we don't have a delay in the fall. One concern I have is I just want to make sure that come September we've really got something, of substance to start talking about. And that's my primary concern with delaying the decision and getting these things take time to get the wheels in motion.
Do we yet know what we're looking for in Carytown in terms of design or nothing?
I think we do. I think we have a pretty good idea of the scope. That area had been included in an earlier effort that the DDA undertook to do improvements on 5th Division. And when it came time to go forward with that project, the board resolved to separate out the Carytown area. It was left behind as we undertook phase 1, which is most of the rest of that corridor. What was particularly compelling about leaving it aside is that area right by the farmers market between Kingsley and Catherine has brick. It's a historic district. There were a few questions we still had with the school about their bus turning and how that might affect Detroit Street. That intersection is at a really strange angle. So we had enough work to do that we set it aside, but the whole scope had pretty much been shaped, and much of the work has already been done. It's now going to be a refinement, the most important of which would be meeting with the historic district to get their support for our moving forward, because it's an important part of this process. We'd like to get a jump on that if we can, just to be sure we're not going to expend any design dollars till we know that we're heading in the direction that they would support.
And I guess that's what I'm asking is, do you anticipate those discussions with the historic district taking place before we hire a consultant, or?
I would anticipate hiring a consultant so that I have materials to be able to present to them. I think we need that consultant to do a good job.
Yes, Roger.
Well, could I suggest then that perhaps we go ahead with the Carytown design, authorize staff to go ahead with the Carytown design so we can get at least that part of the program moving, since that's part of both scenarios.
It's identical.
Both scenarios. Doesn't seem to be any dispute about proceeding with that. And then at the next meeting, work out the final details on which of these projects and how the rest of the projects are going to be synchronized.
I have a question.
Sure.
So we were going with one,
Mhm.
and then then 4 came up in the last meeting. Is that kind of what? And so I guess I missed. Tell me why we changed.
Well, I could fill you in. Actually, staff had come up with 3 scenarios. And
Oh, 3 scenarios.
3 scenarios originally. But from my perspective, there were 2 and 3 were problematic in various ways. So I'm the one who asked to give consideration to a scenario 4 that would essentially flop them in deference to folks from State Street area, sort of advocating for the State Street area. You know, it's been our history, I guess, to be happy in our committee meetings to sort of have robust conversations about these things. And you know, I think it was felt at the time. We went through a pretty thorough conversation about it, and we did vote. But I think it's fair to say that some folks they voted for scenario 1, but it wasn't a huge difference. I mean, as I think Keith alluded to, there's a financial difference of about $100,000 theoretically, and obviously this is budget. You know, and there's some other compelling, interesting cases, and I can tell you, I for one, it would take some convincing to get off of scenario 1. But you know, I guess from my perspective, if we could get Carytown going, and if you know, folks want to have one more round of conversation about it, I can live with that. On the other hand, if folks, especially those folks who participated in operations, feel as though they had enough information and understood the scenarios and the advantages and disadvantages and want to just push forward with a recommendation. So I think once we finish this discussion, I'm going to ask for a show of hands of what to recommend.
And having been at the meeting, I'm comfortable delaying, having the conversation one more time.
Yeah, I voted for 1. I'm comfortable delaying it and having one more conversation.
And as I expressed, the same thing, I voted for 1, but I have no problem with.
So let's just do a show of hands for folks who support going to the July operations committee with review of scenario 1 and
July construction.
I'm sorry.
We are soon going to have a capital improvements committee. May I ask just simply if you were assigning that to your new committee?
Oh, okay, yes.
Just putting that question before
Right.
you take your vote.
To the appropriate committee. No.
To the appropriate committee, there we go.
Does that imply it has to come back to the board, or does the committee have the authority to decide?
I'd feel more comfortable it comes back to the board.
So that won't come back till September?
That's the problem. And that to me is the concern I have. You know, as I say, I mean, I'd rather get moving on it, but I'm not gonna, it's not my hill to die on.
Can we ask the board if they'd be comfortable with going forward with whatever the committee recommends at the July meeting?
I don't know,
I think that's a problem for some of us who may not be able to be here
yeah.
in terms of vacations and the like.
Certainly historically, the work has been done in the committees, but it's been the full board that's done the votes of approval, the official votes.
Roger, your illness is a real problem.
Wasn't by choice.
All right, well, let's go ahead and do a show of hands. All those who...
What are we showing our hands for?
Yes.
Delaying, or what are?
I was about to say.
Sure, Henry.
Yes.
All those in favor of moving forward now with scenario 1, please raise your hands.
Oh. This is why I asked my question. Is the second option going to be delaying, or is
Yes.
the second
Yes.
option?
Yes.
Okay, that's why I asked.
Okay.
Because I don't
Sorry,
know
do we
whether-
need to redo the...
Yeah.
Sorry, because that's what, yeah, so the second option is going to be delaying.
To the July operations.
Okay, so that's
Could
why I asked the question. So
July-
I take back my vote.
Appropriate committee.
Okay. Could
Which is
could
the
I-
September board.
Could I
That's
suggest
correct.
that the second option would be to authorize staff to go ahead with the Carytown design, but delay the decision on the rest of the projects? So that we wouldn't have to wait till September to get Carytown going. We would have to wait till September to.
That would be the second
Yeah.
option that I would
Yeah.
describe to folks. So are we thoroughly confused? Now, let's
I'm just saying,
let's
let's
have
describe the two options first so I know which one to vote.
This is,
That's-
this is the
that's-
problem with not having up and down votes, yes and no.
Yeah, was there something moved?
No.
Well,
this
it's a
is just a
recommendation, so it's not a
recommendation.
resolution. So I'm not quite sure, quite honestly, how we handle
Okay,
this. So
just
I'm-
wanted to make sure that there wasn't, you didn't make any kind of motion to begin with.
No, it's simply a recommendation that came out of committee. Okay, let's try this one more time. Let's see if we can be as clear as we can be about it. The first scenario, the first voting option is to move forward with scenario 1 as described in the board packet
And recommended by ops.
and recommended by ops. The second option is to vote for moving forward with Carytown, with authorizing staff to put out an RFP to get that process moving, but then to delay the discussion on the whether to go through with the rest of scenario 1 versus scenario 4 until the appropriate July committee meeting, whether it be ops or capital improvements. So is that
And then
Got
go to
it.
the board for vote in September.
correct? So are we all good? Okay. All those in favor of the first option of moving forward now, please raise your hand.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It fails by 1.
All those in favor of the second option of delaying 1 month, please show your hands.
And you know,
Okay.
my question would be, since this is not an official vote, does it require a quorum, or is this just?
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you.
No, it does not require, but this is one you're working toward consensus. And the reason it's important is there's sort of a line in the sand. We have done best by continually moving forward. So this allows us to know with some sense of momentum what we're going to put our resources to, staff and otherwise. So I think we're looking for a sense of consensus that the majority of the board, I guess I'll leave it there, feels that this is the appropriate path we want to take. So that's what, it's not a vote, but it is a sense of consensus where a majority of you, I mean, you don't need to be in complete agreement, but the majority of you feel that you can support it.
Let's do this. I would ask Roger again, if you could see what you can do to make the case for State Street. I think you've heard what folks have heard and felt about the reasons for favoring scenario 1. And I think that it might be helpful to people to understand better if you have a compelling reason to have State Street go before Southview.
Well, my feeling about Southview is that the design part is probably pretty important, because there are been rumors for quite some time of possible redevelopment of the Southview area, and having a master design for that, I think, is important. I think going ahead with the construction after that master design is done is probably not as critical, since there may be significant parts of the street that are going to be demolished and reconstructed if there is major redevelopment on that street. But I think the design part, so that the developers have a clear idea of what's going to be expected, is pretty important. The actual construction, I don't think, is nearly as important. On the State Street side, and again, I have to admit, I have businesses in both areas, so I have a foot in both camps. The west side of State Street is a probably the busiest pedestrian sidewalk in the city, in my judgment anyway. And it is one of the narrowest, and there is significant crowding on that street the way it is right now. And I think the sooner we address the bottlenecks, pedestrian bottlenecks that are taking place there, the better. So I would, my push would be to move State Street forward as quickly as possible, because there's in my mind, a clear immediate need for it. On Southview, I don't think that reconstruction is as urgent as a design to guide the reconstruction is. So that's where I would come down on.
So let me point out one thing, if I understood you correctly, though. If you're suggesting the idea of moving forward with the design part of Southview because of possible development and the need to get that going, it would mean that we would have 3 projects in design in 1 year. One of the parameters that maybe, I thought it had been discussed previously, but maybe it just came up in operations, was the feeling that staff and board really could only handle 2 projects at one time in the design phase, since that the design phase tends to be the time when people spend the most time at work. Once it gets to construction documents and construction, usually things go a little smoother. So I just wanted to mention that to you, because I think I failed to mention it.
Yeah, and I guess that's why I would like to delay it a month to discuss whether we can handle 3 at a time, or whether they could be perhaps sequenced during the course of the year. Do one in 6 months and follow another one in 6 months after that. I just would like more information to find out what staff capacities are and what the time demands would be to try to do the design work in that period of time.
Joe?
Maybe I have a potential motion I'd like to make that might solve some of these issues. So perhaps the motion would be that we go ahead and accept the recommendation for scenario 1 from the operations committee. And then, because, spoiler alert, we're going to have a new committee, this capital improvements committee, that we ask that even though we have recommended this scenario 1, that the capital improvements committee continue to explore whether one more project could be in the design phase at the same time.
And possibly, we have the design phase for Carytown spread over 2 years. Could that, for instance, be combined into a year or a year and a half, and maybe the first half of the year is worked on the other projects than the Carytown? I mean, we just don't have enough information to know that.
That we accept this concept of scenario 1, but continue to have this new capital improvements committee tweak the time frame.
Yeah, and particularly the design phase, so that the budgeting doesn't get too haywire. That's the challenge, obviously, to get everything going at the same time.
That's a motion, and then it doesn't have to come back to a September meeting, but it would acknowledge that this is our recommendation, and there could be further changes to it depending on what the capital improvements committee.
So do we have support for Joan's motion?
Support.
Okay, we can comment.
Yep.
So I think that the only issue with this idea of putting it back to capital improvement projects committee is when we vetted all this initially at our retreat, we talked about 2 versus 3 projects. We talked about making the money work. I mean, we've kind of gone down this road, and so when we throw it back, we're going to go down the road again. Thus, we're going to have the full debate again. We're going to have everything happen again, and we're going to pass September, by in October and November. So if that's okay, then that's okay. I just don't think it's realistic to say, let's put it back and then expect that month everything's going to clear itself out. I just, I think we've identified some of these things, and now we're kind of just into which is the way we want to go, and then go from there. I think we're kind of delaying the decision. And then I understand the reasons behind it, but now at this point I think we just kind of have to do it. So that's the only thing is if we try to push other design up, we know that 2016, 2017 we are tight. We are tighter than we want to be, and so that was really the impetus for stretching it out over 6 years.
Tighter financially or
tighter financially?
Staff?
Yeah, and staff, but I'm talking about financially.
Well, I think the intent is that if there are any changes, that a change would have to come back to the board.
I see. Oh, okay, so you're saying go forward with one. If you want to make a change, it's got to go through that committee and then come back to board, and we're essentially altering.
And it will have to go through finance.
Finance.
You know,
Finance, right.
It'll
Okay.
have to be vetted.
Okay.
So you're right, it'll probably take some time.
Okay, so I'm okay with that, because that's essentially saying one, and here's a way for you to make other ideas known, I guess. I guess that's okay.
So we have a motion, I'm sorry.
I want to echo a little what Rishi was saying and reiterate my point was that the work had been done on prioritization, and we spent, 6 or 8 hours as a group together picking priorities of how we manage this. I think that scenario one is fairly close to what that combined work was. Knowing that we stretched things out, Huron design I think ranked a lot higher, but because the nature of it, it's a little stretched out. I mean, I think that was the one that's really Carytown and Huron Street were kind of 1 and 2, and I think it's important that people feel like their hard work in going through that process is honored, because otherwise people won't continue to do that. And if you undo it by a small subset of folks, and then it can be changed based on somebody's personal preferences, then I think that you undermine kind of the work that we do together as a group. So with that, I think that Joan's right on by saying let's not delay anything, let's put forward scenario one, and then it's got to be, if it's going to be changed, it's got to be changed both at committee, sounds like perhaps 2 committees in agreement, and then by the full board again. And I think that that's a solid way to keep everybody moving forward and to keep it honest.
So I would,
And I would just like to echo that as well. We did lots of overlays at that meeting, and I think that in terms of finances, CIP, activity areas, all of that, and I think scenario one best reflects that work we did.
so
I would support.
what,
So if Jones' motion is defeated, what is on the table is already passed?
Nothing's on the table.
Nothing, well, we've sort of had the, what is?
Well,
what
no,
is this
nothing
thing
was
called?
passed.
Nothing is passed.
The straw poll. Correct. So, as I see it, let's think about this for a minute. Joan's motion, and then one thing we should make sure is that everyone's clear on what Joan's motion is, including Susan, who's there vigorously trying to take notes. When we vote on that motion, I want to make sure we're clear that are we voting on that as being a solution moving forward? Or are we voting that as being an option to making an immediate decision to move forward? I just want to make sure there's sort of a consensus of what we're voting on.
I think we are voting, it would be moving forward as much as if we had voted on the first one, because that it is we are accepting the recommendation of the committee, which is to have this timeline.
Okay, that would be my preference, to make it simple, just hands up, hands down on the motion.
Want a quick resolution attempt to make one? Just so that it's really clear? Something to the effect of, whereas the DDA board retreat determined a set of projects and priorities, and whereas the Ops Committee recommended what we will refer to as scenario one, and whereas there are processes for amending scenario one as needed, therefore be it resolved, the DDA board recommends going forward with scenario one.
Wasn't Jones?
Well, the
And
whereas gets
Yeah.
one of the
Well, I think
results.
that the resolved is that we recommend that we go ahead with scenario 1 with the newly formed capital improvements committee to continue to examine whether any changes can be made to the timeline.
So we just add another resolved, and
Yeah.
be it resolved that the appropriate committee is empowered to re-examine the priorities, particularly in planning.
Well, what does that mean for ultimate approval by the board, to come back to the board? I
That's
assume it
what
would
they-
have to, if we're taking final action on scenario 1, any modification of that would have to come back to the board.
Yeah,
And
I
so
think
that can be
I
part
think
of
that is true.
That can
the
be
second resolve.
part of the second
To be
resolve.
brought back to the full board. Just trying to.
Yeah, I just want to point out, without the second resolve, if we had a vote the same way that we did
Right,
before, the motion would not pass.
Right, other than.
Without that,
right.
yeah, without.
Other than the whereas
Yes,
references,
yes.
but yeah. Works.
Phil, are you having fun yet? This is making sausage. So, is there a reasonable comfort level of understanding the resolution? It's a little unusual for us to be moving on something we don't have it actually in writing before us. So I just want to absolutely make sure that people feel comfortable that they understand.
Keith, you want to just pass that around? No.
My little scratches, no, I think you've probably got more of it than I
I think
do.
we've got it,
Okay.
and certainly the
Would you read? You want me
for
to?
the
Okay.
audience. And I'm not going to do it justice, we'll make it pretty, but it's, whereas the board retreat landed us on a list of prioritized projects, whereas the operations committee had reviewed that and ended up with a recommendation for scenario 1, whereas we're recommending that the new capital, whereas the board is recommending that its new capital improvements committee continue to examine if there are any changes it wants to make to the recommended timeline, and any changes then would be brought back to this board for the board's approval. Resolved, the board is moving forward with scenario 1. And I'm trying to capture that the committee is still to examine this to see if they want to make changes to the timeline.
Slight change on it. So
Okay.
the third whereas is, doesn't spell it out as much as saying, whereas there are means of amending through the committee process.
Okay.
And then there is a second, be it further resolved that, and then that's pretty much your whereas, so that the capital improvements committee and finance committee re-examine the possibility of doing more than two design projects.
Okay.
John?
John?
And as long as we're getting the big, I don't think we should be passing a resolution on to a committee that doesn't exist yet.
Okay, the appropriate
So,
committee,
the
change it to the
appropriate
appropriate
committee,
committee. Committee or committees.
That's a good catch.
And I'll be,
At 2 o'clock, no one will ever know.
and I'll be picky, is it will examine or may examine?
I would say May.
Okay.
Okay, how are we doing? Folks hanging in there? Following what we got?
Start
Blowing your
taking,
breath.
start taking your
I
vitamins.
know, I'm just blowing it right out of the water. Okay, we're ready, right?
Right.
Ready to vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Oh.
Motion carries. Thank you, that was fun.
That's how we do introduce all board members.
This is,
The first time we've
next
read
one,
it.
the recommendation for Westford and Ashley parking green extension.
Since I wasn't for committee meeting,
So I have you giving the parking contract extension on
Oh,
mine.
sorry about
Yeah.
that. Okay, yes, all right. So the operations committee did discuss this matter, and what we're talking about is 101 North Main of continuing the parking agreement as it is, that provides for guaranteed parking. Now, as most of you know, we've not typically engaged in guaranteed parking agreements historically, and as we move forward, especially with our just a TDM approach to how we're dealing with parking in the downtown, it's not something that we typically would favor moving forward with. This particular agreement does date back to the early 1980s. It was a TIF generated from the construction of 101 North Main that allowed for the construction of the Ann Ashley structure, which I understand now has been paid off since 2003. 2003. Just to put it in perspective. So the other pieces to it, and we can get more detail from Susan as needed, but that this agreement has actually been re-upped, I think twice from its initial term, and that the operations committee, in discussing it, felt that it wasn't in the best interest of downtown to further extend this contract. Is that a reasonable, capture that reasonably well, or Susan, go ahead and add to it. I want to make sure we give this proper.
Yeah, the timeline and all of that is correct. The garage agreement had 25% of the spaces in the garage assigned to the building. Yeah, there were 2 extensions. One was done by the board, one was done by committee. Mr. Broder is here, caught in traffic, not the fault of his. So if there were questions, they could be asked. But the committee, heard from me that again in the early '80s, this building and this garage were kind of tied together at the time of the construction of both of them, which suggests why they both look alike. They're the same architect. So if you've got any questions, Joe or I are happy to answer.
Susan, if the contract is not renewed, would they have to give up their permits?
No, the permits then become a month-to-month arrangement where they could be turned in at any point, and the DDA then has the opportunity to take them back at any point. We don't typically do that. There are instances where garages have had to close for construction, and where there's a contract, we are obligated to find alternate arrangements for those people. That happens very rarely, but that's a concern. On a month-to-month arrangement, also the permit could be turned back in, and that means that the arrangement is absolutely a flexible one, and what it affects the property owner is it is no longer a guarantee of parking at that point. Permits are at that point on a consensual shared agreement. Really what binds us is to ensure that the permit is continually paid for. If someone stops making payment, that permit then is voided. And as I said, it has to do with terms for contracts for leases. There is no guarantee of parking.
Sorry I had to leave the room to start the conversation, but it seems to me that we are on the brink of having another study done, and I would think that we shouldn't enter into anything of any length without having that be part of the discussion through the management. And I could see maybe extending this 1 year until we have a chance to get the study and digest it and see what that means. But that's about all that I would be willing to do. If Nelson Nygaard thought it was a good idea to continue, then we could go from there.
Is that a motion?
So that's.
Here we go again.
How would that study impact it? Like, what could come back from the study that would make it a yes or no?
I think that the study could say that there's a need in that area of town, for instance, that would need more numbers of flexible monthly parkers. They may say that you're exceeding capacity by 10%, and we need to have some of those brought back in, or maybe there's these spaces that aren't being that's not actually being utilized as well. It could be because there's the people that are not using these permits on a regular as frequently. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways that it could interpret it and say, we really need to have more flexibility, and particularly in this location, particularly going forward.
Could I ask how this came to be in the first place?
The original contract? So at the time that this came up, there was no DDA. And I shared with some that traditionally, DDAs rely on a TIF to fund their projects. And many DDAs like ours were created once they knew they had a TIF source. So in the early 80s, One North Main and the former Tally Hall / Liberty Square building were both proposed, and those projects were seen as a way to generate a TIF to build parking. The original DDA focus was on constructing more parking downtown. So the DDA was created at the same time that the buildings were built, and we gained the TIF from One North Main, which was then directed to the Ann and Ashley garage. We gained the TIF from the Liberty Square private portion to construct the Liberty Square garage. We were not operating parking at that point. The city had the DDA functioning as a mechanism to collect the TIF and to pay for the construction, but they oversaw the construction of those garages and they ran those garages. So it was a city contract with One North Main. And as I understand it, it was designed, especially with 25% of the spaces, it was designed both to safeguard a revenue stream for the garage and to safeguard the viability of the building and its leasing. Because that was a lot of office space to hit the market at the same time. Fortunately for the garage, we got a lot of money out of them because the building went bankrupt almost, well, in a short time thereafter. The parking was not enough for them to get enough leaseholders to fill the building. So it was a benefit at the time of construction that kept a revenue stream to a garage, which at that point was seen, I think, as being on the outer edges of downtown. It was on the wrong side of Huron, on the wrong side of Main Street. And so that revenue stream was seen as something that could sort of justify the amount of TIF that the DDA was now going to dedicate to it. As John pointed out, that bond that was used to construct the garage, DDA paid that off in 03, thereabouts. So we're about 12 years since we've had any real connection between the two. In fact, that's a freestanding garage that's now a net generator of revenues for the parking system. It's probably 800 grand a year that's coming to the parking system to support other parking garages from that building. So again, the relationship was one at the time of the inception.
And the building, in spite of the early revenue stream concerns, is one that, especially during daytime hours, is often full.
Yeah, it's a garage that's under, it's got interesting challenges because many of them are tied together at the same day part. We have a lot of government workers in there, county and city, and it's a lot of 8 to 5. There are some other, city police, for instance, work shifts, but much of it is 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. The office is Monday through Friday. But what's interesting in that area is we're getting a lot of new competing challenges. So for instance, the county brought some of their courts downtown, juvenile court. Having spaces for the public to come and use the court, it is really functionally the space that we're sending them to. The hotel coming in, it's where we're going to send hotel guests. That garage is sort of under some challenges that it's, when it was created in the 80s, I don't think anybody understood what it was going to help us with. It has availabilities on the weekend, as we've had discussions about the farmers market. It has availabilities in the evening, but it's that overlay of a lot of demand at the same day part that is its challenge, and it has it's got a lot of wait list to it at this point because so few permits come back because of the government workers. That's the piece that's important. It's not so much the private sector permit contract, it's the county and city users that impede our ability to make spaces available to the public. And I can tell you what Nelson Nygaard would say about government workers and parking, but we'll let them do their work.
So one thing that I failed to point out to folks, I want to make sure everyone recognizes that there is a letter from Mr. Broder in your packet, page 29, which is the specific request for the 10-year extension. And on page 30, there is a very brief write-up on the renewals that we've been referring to, the timeline. So I just want to make sure folks are availing themselves of that information.
John, I also know that Mr. Broder was signed up to speak at the beginning but couldn't, and he's here now, so it would be okay with me if he wanted to address us right
Just
now.
4 minutes.
Would folks just
Fine.
show it? Mr. Broder? The way we do this, we'll give you 4 minutes. When you've got 1 minute left, I'll give you that signal. How's that?
Never used 4 minutes. It's not a problem. So thanks for having me. And Susan gave the history appropriately. She left out one sort of important, very important thing for us. And one is that when we bought the building in 2000, we bought it with certain tenants in place. Many of those tenants are still there, the very same tenants, Miller Canfield, Comerica Bank, so on and so forth. And in their leases, and again, probably tied back to the original construction of the building, was the promise of parking in the Ann Ashley deck. So contractually, I believe I have some obligation at a certain number, quite a bit less than 25% of the deck, to provide my tenants with some parking. And so, I've got a little education on your overparking situation and understand sort of how the times have changed with respect to demand and what you're doing downtown. And so an extension is something we're interested in. A reduction in number is something I'm very, very open to. In fact, we have spaces today where we're paying for cars and they're not assigned. And so, our agreement expired yesterday. We're giving those ones back. You can put them in the pool and sell them. That's great. We probably don't need just a flat-out extension of what it was. There's probably something in between that might work for both of us if you were open to it. But I do have some what I would call real-life pressure at a certain number. That number is probably in the 80s as opposed to the 189s. So that's just a little bit of a magnitude of the numbers where I feel like I need to work very hard with you folks to get some commitment for some ongoing set of spaces on an ongoing basis. And the rest we'll do as monthly parkers, just like everybody else does. We've got them, we'll pay for them, and if they cycle in and out, they cycle in and out. The good news is One North Main is full, and so I kind of know my parking number, and if I know the rules of the game going forward, then I know what my leasing team can offer or not offer with respect to parking for space in the deck. And it's perfectly okay to say someone for our next tenant, who I don't know who it would be because we're full, our next tenant, parking's on your own, call Republic Parking, figure it out, have a nice day. Doing it sort of midstream of leases is currently a little bit difficult for us. So my appeal to you would be, listen, if we can do something on the magnitude of 80 to 100 as an obligation, we're obviously paying for them, we're paying the going rate, there's no special deal with respect to cost, that'd be really helpful to us. It'd be good for One North Main, it'd be good for downtown. I almost used 4 minutes.
Very good.
I'm going to use my last part of a minute to say thank you for your words about Detroit. We're very active in developing downtown Detroit in the multifamily and office sector. It is exciting. Come visit. I'll give the tour. I don't know who gave your tour. Was it Bruce
We had
Schwartz?
Jeanette from Detroit Experience.
I'm sure I give a better tour. So come visit us. It's exciting down there, and I do believe that the region has to work together. So thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah, actually, I've got a question for you. The leases that you've entered into that guarantee parking moving forward beyond the end of your parking contract, can you tell us when those leases extend to?
It's actually, let me correct that a
I
little
just want to
bit.
make sure I'm
They're
understanding.
tenants that were in place when we bought the building 15 years ago are the same tenants today who have a promise of parking. So it's not anybody we've done recently. Our obligation is to use best efforts, which I think I'm doing right here. But there is a group that they had it in their lease contractually. They're still there. Their leases have been extended over time, and they're still there.
But maybe I'm not asking properly. For those folks, when do their leases end?
Oh my goodness! I mean,
How long are we talking?
Canfield's got 10 plus years to go. Comerica's got 6-7 more years to go. It's a long time, and those were guys who were there originally.
Okay.
So
So it sounds as though it's just something that kind of fell off the radar screen, that there's an actual end to this guarantee.
to be honest with you, the 5 years was all I could get.
Yeah.
That's all I could get, so I have to work with what I have.
All right, fair enough, thank
So,
you. Thank you for clarifying.
That was my question. Great, nice.
Sorry.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, we have yet again another recommendation on the table. Guess I'm open to Joan coming up with something. All right, we'll give Roger a shot at it
Yeah.
first. And then
Well, yeah, I understand Mr. Roeder's issues as well as ours. I'm wondering if there might not be some sort of a compromise position where, as his leases that contractually obligate him to provide parking expire, the contract would expire, so that the only parts of the current contract that would remain in the spaces that would be guaranteed are for leases that he currently holds that have guaranteed parking, and that though that contract would expire when those leases expire. Something along those lines. So he is not in violation of his leases, but at the same time I should say we're not actually getting spaces back because they will continue to be able to be used on a month-to-month basis. But the only ones that would be guaranteed would be ones in which he has a lease that guarantees those, and that would, again, terminate when those leases terminate, and then would go back to a month-to-month.
I think that's pretty much what he said he wants to do, and so what I'd like to recommend, since the letter asked for administrative approval to extend the agreement, I would say that I'd like to move that we give Susan the leeway to negotiate an agreement with Mr. Roeder for an extension of the parking agreements, and it sounds like that is simply going to be, for those amounts that they actually need.
Yeah, and we would want to see copies, or at least of the leases, or at least appropriate parts of those leases, not the financial terms, obviously. So we would see the termination date and.
I'm not sure we want to get that much into his
Okay.
leases. I would say just to negotiate, let him worry about that, but allow Susan to negotiate as to how many with a cap at 5 years.
And the cap at X amount of spots too.
I would like
Because
to
he was saying it was like 80.
make sure that we have some documentation about who the tenants are, how many parking spaces are associated with them, and when does their lease expire. I think we'd ask for that, at a minimum, so we understand how to tie, the lease to the people.
Just a cautionary piece. In some ways, I don't want us to get into the world of the commercial brokerage. So if someone knows that Miller Canfield's lease terminates, I don't want us to then be the mechanism that they come in as vultures and
Yeah.
seduce them with their charms to get out of downtown. I want to keep them in downtown. So on some level, if you authorize me, I'd like to be able to keep some discretion so that there's an element of privacy around those leases, and see if we can't find our way to something that's an appropriate. I'll share with you as is available, but I fear brokers coming and swooping in and taking some great tenants and bringing them to some other location outside downtown.
Your point's well taken, but, Mr. Broder, I would ask that, you share what information you can to help us be able to sunset things. That's the bottom line, what I'm looking for.
So this feels very sensible where this is going. So, two comments. One is, with respect to if it's done administratively and I'm working with Susan in a private setting, I'm happy to share those facts and figures so she can eyeball them and make the recommendation. So I have no issue with that. Publishing lease expiration dates, she's got it right. I don't want to do that. And then, just so you'll know, sort of my strategy, I heard what you suggested. I've got two sets of obligations. One is three. I've got four scenarios. I've got a group I'm not using and I'm going to turn them back. I've got a group that I'm just administrating, God knows why. I've got a group that I'm obligated for best efforts and a group that I'm obligated for. I'd like to talk to this group about an extension regarding those two, the ones where the landlord is supposed to give a best effort and the one where the landlord is obligated. The total of these two together is about 113 spaces overall, which is down from my current obligation of 189, which I'm paying for.
Could we just then authorize Susan to negotiate an extension that would have a definitive sunset on all the spaces, and let Susan work out what those terms should be?
And then with your permission, I'll try to bring it back to committee at the end of this month so we can keep this moving, because obviously this is sort of sitting in abeyance until that time. John?
How many contracts do we have out there right now that are not paying a premium?
Boy, relatively few that are not paying premium. Yeah, I think you're right. I think this is it, other than the contracts with the government, the county and the city.
Yeah, I'm personally not comfortable extending a contract and reserving parking places without some sort of premium attached.
So what is being referred to is in subsequent periods, when we took over the system, we began to see these contracts as making a developer a partner with us in the long-term sustainability of the facility. So initially it was a $30 a permit a month addition that escalated with a CPI. It has since been modified to being a 20% of the permit. So that way it just floats automatically as the permit increases. So I'm not gonna do the math, but if a permit were $100, they are paying above market, they're paying $120 for that same permit, because it's seen as an opportunity for them to buy into the long-term construction costs, repair costs. That's where the surcharge goes.
How many permits or spaces are that you are absolutely contractually obligated?
If my numbers are right, you mean as opposed to best efforts?
Yeah.
Correct.
75-ish. So 73, 76.
And for what period of time is that?
It runs with a variety of leases with a variety of expirations.
Not just one single?
Correct, yeah.
We had a motion. Oh,
I'm sorry, I was gonna ask that this, after Susan does this, I would still like it to come back to committee before coming back to the board, so that the committee can, again, form a recommendation.
so we did have a motion on the floor way back long ago.
I don't think it was ever seconded.
Yeah, so.
Second.
But, things have gotten a little muddled, but have people followed?
it's the same.
Yeah,
It's the
it's
same
basically
motion.
to have Susan negotiate and then make a recommendation to the operations committee, which will then make a recommendation to the board.
I just have one more comment. When the leases for those companies that have parking in there, when those leases were drafted, I have to believe that if there was a term limit for the original agreement, that it should have been in that lease. Who would do a lease without saying, well, I'll give you this, but understand that my contractual arrangement with the whoever at that time is only for this number of years, so I can guarantee it past that. I mean, that's just a responsible lease. So I don't understand how the leases kept getting extended in that it wasn't tied to when this agreement ended. So that seems odd to me. I just wanted to make that.
Without knowing for sure, but just as a sneaky lawyer, I would say that somewhere in that lease, there's probably some sort of clause that says we're not responsible for an act by some government that we don't have any control over. But anyway, I think what Mr. Broder's trying to do is comply with the lease regardless of what some irresponsible government might do, or act of God, etc.
No, your point's a good one, and it's what I was trying to get at with asking the questions, but it sounds as though Mr. Broder sort of inherited these leases, as I understand it, so. All right, well, do we want to vote on this motion that has been put forward by?
I mean, if we do nothing, they'll just expire. So my motion is to have Susan negotiate for a potential extension of the lease.
So would we have to have a quasi-extension until that's done?
Yeah, I mean, it is already expired.
Right,
So
but,
it's actually
but
a
they're
new
not,
lease.
but nobody's, it would be a new lease, because it would, I mean, it's, we're not taking back any permits, so people are still parking.
So it's in effect month to month for the,
It's a
for
month
the
to
moment,
month
for
till
the
such
moment,
time
as
as
of right
a
now.
new lease is
Yeah.
created. I want to be clear that it has expired. So it's a new lease that you would be signing.
New contract, I mean.
A new, yeah.
It would be a new contract.
Sorry, I got that word stuck in my head. Yeah, a new contract.
All right. Well, folks have any other comments? Ready to vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Motion passes. Thank you for your patience.
This really is an exciting meeting.
You guys are trying to,
No,
you're making it hard on me in my last meeting as chair here. Susan just set this up to challenge me. She's doing well. Okay, what's our next parking report? Page 3.
Not even out of ops.
Yeah, let's get out of ops. As soon as possible.
Not there yet.
Yeah.
I have a 3-word report on, or a 3-sentence report on construction 4th and William.
Parking.
Parking reports. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well,
Appreciate
we've
that.
got
How fast is that going to be?
I guess we have a written parking report. This is our new practice. I guess I would ask that for those who have read it, has anyone got any questions or concerns in particular about what they're seeing?
Just reflecting what we said in ops, which was love the new parking report. I think it gives us better information on a month-to-month basis, and then we do the quarterly numbers, which makes more sense since there's so many month-to-month fluctuations in the numbers.
Sandy?
You may see an additional meter bag fee waiver, which I hope, for some meters on 4th Avenue, and a couple spots in the market on June 26th. And I noticed that my message to them got lost, that it may not be needed on Monday, June 29th, because they were all bagged anyways.
That's funny.
So the if then message didn't get there, but you will see that there hopefully were some waived meter bags, yeah.
Okay, if there are no other questions, concerns about the parking report?
No.
John, now, go for it.
4th and 1 construction update. I was by this morning. They are working at getting new parking equipment in, getting the second lane on William open, which has been closed for some time for art fair. Structural steel was delivered yesterday, and it will start to be erected, I'm hoping today, or at least starting tomorrow, and their intention is still to have that portion of the structure complete by art fair, which gives them 2 weeks, but they're optimistic that it's going to go up quickly. Again, a reminder, construction will stop during art fair, that the polio lot will be open and available to those that use it during art fair.
Great. Any questions for John? No? And Ashley Bike House update, Keith.
This is like the last ops thing, and it's just as quick as his. It's moving along well. We had some hold up with galvanized, getting the steel galvanized. That has worked its way through. Right now, glass is being fabricated. Bike hoops are being delivered, and we will be opening sometime in July. Do we have an idea when in July yet, or is it?
Around the 20th?
At the 20th, we'll be opening the new bike house.
Very good. Is there anything else that Ops wants to add to their report? So the next meeting of Ops is Wednesday, July 29th at 11 a.m. Finance Committee, Mr. Narayan.
I have a resolution to move for John's last meeting to approve a DDA reimbursement policy.
Second?
And as a backstory real quick, we've had a longstanding travel policy, and we decided to also develop a reimbursement policy, not for any other reason other than to have one, because we just did not have one. So we are being proactive, not reactive here, which I think is good. The resolution is real short, so I'll just read it real quick. Whereas DDA staff brought forward the following reimbursement policy to follow when making reimbursement payments to DDA staff and board members. Whereas the DDA Finance Committee has reviewed and approved the following DDA reimbursement policy. Resolved, the DDA approves the attached reimbursement policy. I won't read the reimbursement policy unless there's a burning desire for me to do that. Basically, we just kind of set the procedure for what was basically already done, but written out. Staff reimbursements are approved by the executive director, and executive director reimbursements are approved by the treasurer or a designee if the treasurer is no longer there, which means I'm offloading the work onto Marie because I'm not going to be treasurer anymore. So sorry about that. So that's about it. We went through it a couple times and hashed it out, and we all felt pretty good about this at finance. So I'll open the floor to any questions.
Do I understand correctly that this is somewhat modeled or somewhat similar to AAATA's reimbursement policy?
I don't know that.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Yes.
So I think, it's good to know that there's a local public agency that has a similar policy. Any other questions, concerns? Everyone had a chance to read it? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed?
Correct vote.
Thank you very much.
And that's next committee meeting, Tuesday, July 28th, under a new finance cheerleader.
Partnerships. Joe, you're on your own today.
I am, and very angrily, because I wasn't even here for the partnerships meeting. My co-chair, Al McWilliams, was, but he's not here today. So I'm being forced to read something about a meeting at which I was not in attendance. But I would like to move a resolution anyway, which is on page 35, sorry, 35. And that is the resolution to approve a grant application for the next phases of the Power Art Signal Box project.
Support.
And so this was our Power Art on the 8 downtown traffic signal boxes was phase 1, and it has been very well received. We've submitted a grant to the state to seek funding for more of these, and but this request requires a vote by the board in order to do this. So we recommend an approval.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Sandy
I think we had a
seconded.
second.
Yeah.
Any questions, concerns?
I know that as soon as these went up, people started talking about them. I mean, it took them about half a day to notice them. And it's, from what I hear, they've been wildly popular. And I think we should do everything we can to support it.
Yeah, the main comment has been, why aren't there more?
And we'll answer that right now.
And we'll answer that, yeah.
All right. Joan, do you have anything else to share?
It's just that we just have to vote on that.
Oh, I'm flaky today. I'm flaky today,
I
okay.
get voted out of office.
It's about time. I've
Lame
been
duck.
trying for ages.
Impeach, I say.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you.
I'm not sure we can do it in the last 20 minutes of his term.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let it ride.
Possibly not, possibly not. So otherwise, there were just some partner updates, and our next meeting's gonna be next week, next Wednesday at 11.
That's take August off, typically? No.
Yeah, unless we have something pressing. I think we probably will.
We have the communication committee, but our great communicator, Mr. McWilliams, is not here today. I don't see an item,
Scratch
line
that.
item under it, so.
So he would be around for the demise of his committee.
Well, you guys are being brutal today. Al and I are getting thrown under the bus. Executive committee. So in your packet, you'll see on page 36, a resolution approving a compensation change for DDA Executive Director. I guess I would like to say, in doing the review and getting comments back from most of you, that there's a lot of support for the work Susan has done over all these years and continues to do at this point. So I just think it's important that we publicly acknowledge that Susan and staff have done an absolutely terrific job moving forward. One of the steps we took is to talk with Steve Powers about what the city is doing for equivalent management level positions. And the initial information that we received was that for this year, the compensation change range was from 2 to 3%. That's the only information we had at that point. So when the committee discussed this, we landed on 2.5%, split the difference as being the average. And that is what's reflected here in this resolution. Now, came to our attention just today that as of yesterday, the city has kind of renewed their approach, and rather than having a sliding scale between 2 and 3% for various individuals, apparently they're just settling on a 2.75% increase across the board. So, I would ask if people would like to make I'll put forward the resolution, but I just want to give a little preamble to sort of background to this. So I'd like to move the resolution approving the compensation change.
I don't think we can.
I'm sorry. Oh, I can't. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
I would like to move the resolution.
Support.
And the figure here is based on 2.5%.
Right, so I was going to say, are we moving it forward as is and then amend? Is that how we're going to do this?
That would be,
we want
that
to.
would be how we would have to
Okay,
do it, yes.
so I'd like to propose an amendment that the increase be $3,080, which is 2.75% as reflected by the city standards.
Can you tell us what that?
Be 115,000.
So if you add it up, it'd be 115,080.
That's what I get to. Okay.
And Bob seconded that amendment.
So we have to.
So
I would consider that friendly, and the seconder proposed it, so you consider it, so it can be considered a friendly amendment. So do friendly amendments have to be voted on?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, thank you. So, we have a revised motion. Do we now have to then go back and
Yes.
vote on the resolution? Are there any other changes, concerns, questions that folks have about the rest of the body of the resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you very much. The next committee meeting for the executive committee is September 2nd, 11 a.m. Under new business, we have a reminder, no DDA monthly meeting in August. I guess it's up to the committees to decide whether they'll be meeting in August or not.
And then I guess another reminder that we have to stick around after we adjourn here, because we have another meeting immediately following.
Thank you very much. Yes, we do. Other audience participation, do we have anyone else wishing to address the board? No? Well, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Who wants to stay? Okay. So, I guess we can move on to our second meeting. Does everyone at their place have the agenda for our annual meeting? Roll call.
Would you like a roll call?
Yes, please.
All right, let's do a roll call for the Ann Arbor Downtown Development Authority annual meeting on July 1st, 2015. Bob Gunzel.
Here.
Roger Hewitt.
Here.
Rick Clough.
Here.
Joan Lowenstein.
Here.
Al McWilliams. John Mowat.
Here.
Rishi Narayan.
Here.
Keith Orr.
Here.
Steve Powers. Sandy Smith.
Here.
John Split.
Here.
Bill Weiss.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Just text your answer to Susan.
We're all getting a little loopy here. I think whatever I've got, it's catching. Okay, new business, nomination election of DDA board officers for fiscal year 2016. We have the posts of treasurer, secretary, vice chair, chair. Have any motions from the floor?
So are we doing one at a time? Yes.
One at a time. Treasurer?
I nominate Marie.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Secretary would be next. Do we have any?
I'll nominate Sandy Smith.
All right.
Any other nominations?
Yeah,
Any
that's-
other nominations?
Dude.
No?
I don't know.
It's fine.
All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
I don't know. I'm gonna go my lines crossed.
All right, vice chair. Come on, guys, help me out a little bit here.
Okay. I'll nominate Rishi Narayan.
I'm gonna nominate myself.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And chair.
I'll nominate Roger Hewitt.
Support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, thank you. I think. So our next piece that is actually much more interesting is DDA committees, fiscal year 2016. I think most of you are aware that we've looked to restructure our committees so that we can better reflect the workload that we see in the coming year. So the basic structure of it, let me paint the picture and then we can come back. And do we need to do these resolutions one at a time? Okay. So the first resolution would be to dissolve the DDA Communication Committee.
So moved.
Support.
Do we want to go ahead and act on it as we go, or do you want to? Okay.
We've all discussed. Sure.
Everyone's comfortable with it? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Resolution to dissolve the DDA Operations Committee.
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Resolution to create a DDA Capital Improvements Committee. All those,
Support.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Resolution to create a DDA Operations Committee, parking and transportation specific.
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Resolution to reappoint the DDA Partnerships Committee, Partnership/Economic Development Committee.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Resolution to reappoint the DDA Finance Committee.
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
DDA Executive Committee.
Don't really get it.
That's,
It is what it
it
is.
is what it
That's not
is.
even
Yeah.
a
Yes, that's
resolution.
right.
That's
There's no resolution there, sorry, I was just rolling along.
So with regard to attendees at these committees, I think in the interest of time, with your permission, Mr. Chair, or Mr. Chair, we'll do that by email, just to make sure we have people signed up to the correct committee, rather than take time at this point. And I hope everybody who has a chair feels comfortable that they're in the right spot. So, thank you.
I will entertain a motion. First, is there any other business for the annual meeting?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So it has become a tradition here at the DDA that the staff take a moment to thank the outgoing chair. For all of you who are a part of this, you know that we lean on our chair in particular for a lot of things that just come up between the meetings as well as at the meetings. And this year in particular, I really want to call out John. Your wisdom and your intelligence and your passion for downtown came out in just so many different ways, in so many different instances. And all of us in the staff appreciated the time you took. I know we kind of twisted your arm a little about becoming chair, because it does take a time commitment. We didn't want to tell you that, Roger. But it does take a
Can I
time
let go
commitment.
now?
Can I slap her now?
Standing in it sounds so easy. That's right. But you were willing to do it, and I have to say this has just been an extraordinary year. And for all of us at the staff, we want to thank you. You really made it fun for us, and I feel like we had such a purposeful year. A lot got done.
Yeah.
So with that, we have a small gift, as is tradition. We'd like you to open and maybe, yeah.
Have to open in front of everybody?
Yeah.
Show it to the camera.
Yeah, nope, that comes second. So
It's different than other things I've gotten in the past from the DDA. Usually it's been pieces of buildings and rails.
Rusty.
This one's,
Don't
You haven't
speak too
opened it yet.
this
soon.
one's
Right.
much lighter.
Could be some foam insulation.
Very well wrapped.
Jada.
Nice job. It's tissue paper.
Very
It's a
well.
lot of tissue paper. It's a tie. It's a.
Which we don't see you wear very often, but
No.
there are those special occasions.
This is a floor plan, apparently, of a building of some sort. This is what you call your architect's tie.
So when you're pitching that next job, they'll know what work you do.
I think it's 4th and William, isn't it?
Yeah.
It goes in your shirt, Jeff.
There you go. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I've enjoyed, all in all, this year of being chair, and I do appreciate all the hard work from the staff and from all of you. I feel good that I think we did get a lot of accomplished. You know, we got the, between getting the street design manual done and moving forward with individual projects with our partners at the library and the county and throughout the city. Trying to get things launched for a new construction project that's going on in the parking structure, the bike house. And moving, I especially appreciate folks' cooperation at the retreat for sort of a new approach to how we sort of approach doing our business, and feel it worked well to get to a point of consensus of what projects to move forward with. So thank you very much for all your hard work.
Nice job.
Thank you. We do have a second piece to open.
Oh.
I held you back, but it's now yours to open. It is not a piece of concrete.
Yeah, I like these light presents.
Yeah. So this is our way of saying it's on its way.
All right, this is both embarrassing and special to me because I am you'd call it early adopter to Arbor Brewing. You know, I've got a great love for craft beer. Arbor Brewing was amongst the first ones there, and it happened that we were at a meeting one day, I think Bob and maybe Joan and Susan and I were sitting there, and I glanced over and I saw this stool up at the bar that said Gunzel on it. And I didn't remember. I didn't know. I guess
You guys gave it to me.
I know, but I guess I totally forgot about it. So I think I said some, it's like, wow, that is just way cool. That's great. So I'm very excited to have my very own.
Very own school.
That's terrific. Thank you very much.
Wait,
Thank
is it
you.
still at Arbor Brewing?
At our,
Yeah.
It's pretty sweet.
Do you get to throw anybody out of the
Exactly.
I think you do.
No, that's the problem.
Well, it depends. It depends if you have the chutzpah.
Excuse me, that's mine.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Excuse me.
Oh,
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Sorry.
I can see where this is going.
I gotta let go.
Hey, you're out.
You should have let that go. You should have let that go and seen if like the meeting like inevitably just continued on, because you never know, we just all left and like officially in the minutes it's still going.
Oh man.
Hi.
Well, this was an exciting last meeting to chair.
Yes.
Support.
Yep, John. All in favor of adjourning the annual meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Well done.
Wow.